I think to start with, the commitment from the top, the tone of the top is very important. The board level, there must be, some sort of a commitment from the top that percolates, and everybody should understand that, this is there is no what we call the little corruption, petty corruption. There's no differentiation between a corruption of 1 rupee, I believe, and the corruption of 100 crores. So one is that the tone from the top management. Second is investing a time in training. It's very important. I think it should not be like a one-off affair that you conduct a program and people do come and talk about it. That we are like a business awareness week we have in public sector. So it should be a regular affair. The compliance officers must be empowered. At the same time, when you frame your code of conduct, when you frame your vendor's code of conduct or the employee's code of conduct, you should have taken a feedback from the employees. You should take feedback from the vendors rather than coming out with something, because it is very specific to a particular sector. For example, something which is a risk in the mining sector may not be equally there in a power sector. So taking a feedback, a regular feedback, engaging your employees, engaging your vendors, and the most important, it should not be just a document that you just sign it and put it in a record. There should be a regular, and maybe industry association may take lead. I mean, where they can do some sort of a not necessarily a business type of checkup, but a peer review or kind of a rating. That may also help. And then, and there is a scope for a learning from the private sector and public sector as well. What I have seen, let's say my example of a Thailand, I was there in a Thailand, and then there was a group of industry which came out with an initiative known as PAC, you know, and also the Institute of Directors got involved, where they came out with the Integrity Pact. So Integrity Pact concept, which is being supported in India by the Central Vigilance Commission, I think can be replicated in another form in the private sector as well. Because where you have an external monitor, where you have a external organizations or individuals uh, who 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 act as a monitor and who can do some sort of a due diligence, give their reports to the findings. It's not name and shame, but also for the process improvement, which is required, because many times corruption do happen because you are not aware of the process. It's not just that you have an evil intent. Many times you're not aware of it. You are not properly trained on those subjects. I mean, that's very important. Yeah.
That's right. That's actually a key point. Awareness and a proper support with training to identify, the risks and the pitfalls when it comes to integrity, and that actually is an important aspect of really integral procurement and supply chains. Very interestingly, also, as it was shared even in the outline of this webinar that we do, OECD has conducted a number of studies,
Yes.
particularly during the time of COVID-19 and the impact of COVID-19 on operations, companies, businesses, supply chain, and also just the way that work is being conducted or could potentially be conducted going on. And they have observed that there are disruptions on supply and demand, and
Mm.
there are situations where suppliers may no longer be able to, continue their activities, for example, and fulfill all their contracts, perhaps. But even as they recognize these challenges that are operational, they also recognize the key risk of corruption between private parties, amongst others, and the importance or the relevance of vigilance and awareness on this front then becomes a very primary aspect to business that each one can take responsibility for. Thank you so much, Mr. Mishra. That was some really, really good insights. And, as we actually, we go across the panel and we come back to you with, some more insights that, you could bring to the table. And with this, I would actually like to, turn towards Professor Samir Srivastava. Professor Srivastava, thank you for joining us again. And look forward to some insights from you. And as we actually turn towards you, there's a lot of rich experience that you bring to the table, right from research as well as practical and pragmatic experience that you've had in the industry and the field. And what would what view would you have to share with us, when you think of how important it is that, organizations ensure that the reputation of companies does not suffer, and at the same time they work to develop credibility in suppliers and manage supplier relationships. Professor Srivastava, we are unable to hear you at this stage. Maybe you need to just unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And developing credibility actually in supplier is always important, whether it's COVID time or time of crisis, because uncertainty is inherently part of supply chain. Will be uncertainty in demand, uncertainty in supply, and then a lot of other issues, consumer behavior, and so on and so forth. But yeah, it becomes all the more important in times of crisis. In general, it doesn't come as a short-term type of tactics or intervention. It generally requires long-term strategic investment in terms of and actions for supplier development, relationship, and management. So firms need to focus on corporate governance and compliance. Compliance, particularly, Mr. Ashutosh did hint about not only in terms of letter but also spirit. What I think also that has come out is not only in terms of compliance or governance, but the way suppliers sort of perceive you. Because in times of crisis, sometimes the balance of your bargaining power shifts. So you are a big procurer, so suppliers are always keen to supply to you. But now the conditions change. Some of the dependent suppliers now are far away, say, in times of COVID, and then physically they are sort of, because of restrictions, unable to supply. So you need to look sort of suppliers who are in close proximity, and here your reputation and credibility come in very handy if you had it. Otherwise, you need to cultivate it, and it cannot be cultivated in a very short period of time. So you also require something like fairness, integrity, and transparency, as well as ease of doing business, what is very popular jargon in India, but actually it makes sense. So it brings in a lot of credibility and brand reputation. Of course, compliance related CCI and your internal board, and then your appellate commission and the Supreme Court and so on are there. I'm not dwelling into that. Another important thing is you send proper signals to the suppliers, because your actions speak louder than words. Say right now, one of the simple things a lot of you may have come across is Asian Paints. They are offering normal increments and promotions to their employees. So it's internal to the internal stakeholder, but still it sends messages across that they are more dependable. They believe in long-term relationships. So you can probably not look it into a time of specific context, but long-term relationship. Similarly, across the world, say small initiatives like by firms like say Target or Amazon, hourly rates what they pay to their wage earners, they are slightly higher than the federal rates. You can relate it to minimum wages in India. Normally, corporates pay higher, but nowadays, in time of crisis, I have witnessed that they are trying to pay even lower, because again, the unemployment among the less skilled workforce is on the high. So here you can again bring in a lot of reputation and integrity. So say firms like Amazon, they pay minimum of $18 in the Western country per hour, or Target pays minimum of $15. So this is how. And then another thing, of course, going back to what Mr. Ashutosh said, there's always a, company's code of conduct. So in Indian context, you have the famous Tata code of conduct, which is a sort of exemplary in the Indian context. So they have some terms. If you, I don't know if you have time, otherwise I can go into slight detail. If you permit, it's up to you, Natasha.
Yes, yes, please. It would be a pleasure to hear about it.
Yeah, so say Tatas have a code of conduct where they consider it as sacred. And although I worked in Aditya Birla Group, which is equally good, but perhaps in this perspective, Tatas are slightly ahead. and exemplary. So the sacred, they say, the focus is on safety, agility, care. So you care about, for all your stakeholders. Your R is for respect. So respect all your stakeholders, and this has to be exhibited through your actions, through your practice, not necessarily on paper alone. And then E is for ethics and D is for diligence. So this is where they focus on. Then they have another aspect of it where they have a responsible supply chain management concept, what they call RSCM. So it is analogous to say ESHS and those type of guidelines in Europe, or say in multinational corporations or agencies like World Bank. So there's a lot of focus on environment, social, human rights, governance, safety, sustainability. So similar to that, they focus on RSCM, where the focus is on environment, health and safety, human rights, ethics, and compliance. So compliance is not the only one. So the whole spirit conveyed is leadership with care. So what I would try to summarize is you need to have a clear vision and very well laid out policies. You need, as Ashutosh also pointed out, leadership, will and commitment, which is required in any initiative or anything to happen, particularly in private. Similar to analogous to rules and regulations in government, the signals of wills and commitment go all through to the bottom. And then, of course, also some related issues, policies like say whistleblowing or say limits on the amount of gift you can take. Such practices exist in the World Bank also, in Tata Motors or Tata Power or all the Tata Group companies as well. So beyond a minimum token amount, they cannot take gift from their any of the stakeholders they are dealing with. So I hope I have sort of answered you. Can you hear me?
I am just attempting to unmute myself. Seema, yes, I could. And thank you so much, Professor Srivastava. That was some really good insight. And Seema, you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you completely.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, just do a quick check there because don't want to lose out. So, Professor Srivastava, I was just saying, yes, good. And uh, has very
Yeah, they were the leaders in corporate social responsibility, the Aditya Birla Group.
on which particular arena uh, globally today with the SDGs that also with all of you to also be disrupted. So even at M40, 1,500 businesses, retailers, buyers, and suppliers globally, and work groups which are actually committed to buy the 2,500 members and consequently across to their producers and supply chains. And I bring this to attention only to highlight the fact that, we also have the M40 BSCI Code of Conduct, which does follow principles which include some of the aspects you spoke about, Professor Srivastava, which is, fair remuneration, occupational health of safety, decent working hours, no child labor, among some, but also very importantly, ethical business behavior, which is an important principle of the code. And our enterprise does not tolerate any acts of corruption, extortion, embezzlement, or bribery. And even the examples that you cite, do place integrity as a core, when it comes to principles and codes of conduct. And yes, it's important to, not just have a code of conduct, but to follow that with vigilance or continuous monitoring or continuous improvement that allows for, corrective action plans or even development programs to take initiative to meet the challenges or the findings that may have been found in the course of an inspection or a monitoring activity. But to come back to you, Professor Srivastava, as I even highlight that, what would be some of the good practices, if you could share, with us, which are related to due diligence in the time of crisis?
Okay, so again, it's a continuous process, but then probably nowadays, given what scenario we are in, we can leverage ICT a lot. And this is an area which was somehow because of firms being in comfort zone were not explored and exploited to the hilt. Now pushed to the wall, perhaps firms will explore and exploit it. So it could be a blessing in disguise. And here you can focus not only on oversight or due diligence, but you can also get into analytics, an area which fascinates me personally. You can analyze a lot of procurement data and how you can improve your practices, measure suppliers on certain key performance indicators, look into how you can exploit the data that you capture nowadays. At least big corporations have all the data in their ERP systems or legacy softwares or whatever they are using as tools for procurement. The smaller enterprises probably not necessarily, especially in the Indian context, but gradually they'll also pick up. So you can always use that. And one of the key highlights is you focus on developing redundancies in supply chain. So you have some backup suppliers and also focus on suppliers with complementary strengths, which historically also has been the focus, but probably more so now, and have better and enhanced communication. So this is followed worldwide from 30, 40 years. Say Honda, for example, has been doing it across its supply chain in Europe and America. So Americas, during the contract, Honda is always signs such contract that in case of emergencies, at least part of our required supplies to Europe also you have to supply, and vice versa for the European suppliers. Otherwise, the focus is on local, but at the same time, you also bring in redundancy. It also gives you a lot of sometimes opportunities. I know of a local supplier to Tata Motors in Lucknow in India, who would supply to Tata Motors uh, some of the components which needed forging before the party could supply. And for this used to go to Faridabad, which is about 500 odd kilometers, and it takes at least half a day transit time given Indian road conditions. And now, out of contingency because of containment, then they explored a party in Kanpur, which is 80 kilometers away, and it takes 3 hours. And then they could find that the quality was as good. Only thing they needed was to perhaps develop the capacity of the supplier. The supplier didn't have as much capacity. So that brings in a lot of sort of market intelligence type of help. Because otherwise, many times you are happy with the comfort zone you are in and you don't try anything new. So that way, COVID also or these type of crisis also bring in opportunities. Then, of course, another thing it has focuses, and our Prime Minister has also said so in a different tone. And I had been teaching the students for long from sustainability perspective, carbon credits and greener transportation. That think global but act local. So focus more on suppliers who are close by. In case you can develop suppliers close by, because a lot of uncertainties in supply chain are reduced, even in normal times, say your lead times and so on, because it's close by, and the Japanese had been practicing it for long. Although one of the historical reason has been they are a small country. So in any case, the lead times would not be very high. Vis-a-vis say USS, erstwhile USSR, Canada, US or India, larger countries, China. So that is an area where things can work. Local outreach and development helps. There are also some initiatives like working closely with self-help groups or local communities under corporate social responsibility does help. And here your prior reputation also helps, because given the choice, they will also always go for a firm which has a better reputation in terms of credibility and trustworthiness. Uh, Last point I would like to say, and this comes from literature, from a paper published in 2020 in International Journal of Production Economics, where there was a survey of 254 US companies. And they find out that supply chain analytics capability actually synergistically interacts with pressure from customers nowadays, especially in the developed world, and it's coming in India also gradually. The customers also prefer firms who are environmentally and socially conscious. Of course, they are not willing to pay much premium as of now, but still they would prefer if the prices were competitive, the quality was comparable, and so on. So that study finds out that this acts synergistically with pressure from customers for ethical conduct to improve social and financial performance of the company. Of course, due diligence in terms of supplier viability, etc., is being carried out all across in organized sector. So they look into the financial, they look into the reputation, they ask for evidences where they have supplied, to whom they have supplied, they cross check. This used to be happen even 20, 25 years back when I used to work practically in Aditya Birla firm. Of course, last 20 years I am in academics, so I have indirect exposure, or I talk to my friends or during consulting assignments. And then again, market intelligence is important, vendor performance management is important, and last but not the least, which I find missing, is uh, professional managers in procurement are still not being developed properly, be it public sector, be it private sector. And particularly, even in public sector, it's low. You don't have a professional cadre, but here we are talking of private sector. So a lot of them learn from experience, from their seniors, from practice, or say from vendors themselves, say technology vendors. So they would say our software will provide you this. It can sort of capture this type of data and give you a feedback that this supplier performs better on delivery, this supplier is better on quality, and so on and so forth. But probably you need more training. As of now, you have Indian Institute of Material Management in India. Probably Mr. Iyer would say more on it, who do provide some training. A lot of courses go in reputed institutes like IIMS, etc. I have been teaching this for last 15 odd years. But then the focus on procurement is probably 90 minutes, 100 minutes, 120 minutes in a 30-hour module. So probably that needs to increase, but at the same time, the so-called students and customers and stakeholders should also sort of feel like that it is important. As of now, then MOOCs can come. World Bank is offering some MOOC programs. Stakeholders or people who are hearing this show probably can visit procurementlearning.org. There's a site. They provide 3 certifications and one the professional diploma program. I think certifications are free. Diploma program, probably they have a nominal fee. So that's more for public procurement. But then again, lot of it makes sense for private players also, because many of them deal in B2G. So you need to know your customers' processes, how you can sort of bid for the order in terms of goods, works, and services. And anything else? Again, I think I just went into the flow, so may have missed out something.
No, good insight and some important points also, with regards to how development of procurement important, but uh, speaking, on important, we develop procurement managers or the integral aspects of integrity would be communication and trainings, but also to promote and reward integrity. One aspect we promote and reward integrity as a supplement development of standards as well as supplier relationship development. So those are definitely close points. Thank you for those insights and identify and enforce it. They're likely to turn to Sebastian, allow me to now speak with him. Thank you, Mr. for with us. Seema, I am audible?
Now you are, yeah. There were times your voice was a little disrupted.
Okay, my apologies. So I will not take away further because Mr. Ayers does have a lot of experience to share with us. And with that, I would like to actually, request you to highlight for us, what are the effects on supply chain in the COVID-19 times, and how can the emergency factor influence the purchasing process?
Am I audible?
Yes.
First of all, Natasha and Seema, thank you for inviting me to this event and giving me an opportunity to talk about. Well, I would, since you have talked about the COVID times, and as Professor said, COVID pandemic situation has really provided us a lot of learning and a lot of insights how we could do things differently. Uh, all businesses have been hit by COVID, whether they be a public enterprise or private enterprise. The only difference is the degree to which it has affected business. There was a survey done to look at the effect of the pandemic on various functions within the company. And what came out clearly is the supply chain function was the most hit in the company, and the extent was about some 43%, and others were all with a low magnitude. Just to give you a reference of the perspective of the chief procurement officer in a company before the COVID situation and post the COVID situation. Earlier, the CPO would focus on driving digital transformation, improving processes, increasing agility in procurement function. And after the COVID, the focus has totally changed to prioritize cash management, increase saving, improve supply chain visibility in the company. Now, basically, there have been a lot of issues which a purchase manager or a supply chain manager or the head of procurement would have faced during the pandemic situation. First of all, basically, the main issue was supplyability of material. With lockdown at various places, basically getting manufacturers or suppliers to keep production on was a difficult task because getting resources in terms of manpower was extremely difficult. First, basically, was getting permission from the government to start operations. That was the first thing. Except for pharmaceutical business, government did not allow or give permission to start various other operations. Basically, I am working for a company which is a life science company. In addition to pharmaceuticals, we also make crop protection chemicals. And with the advent of the peak crop season, it was essential for us to make our pesticides, seeds available to the farmers in the country. We went basically to each and every agent, our own opening of operations, at the same time to also ensure how we could get our associates in terms of suppliers or service providers to start operations once again. Now, while saying this, basically, it was so extremely difficult that not only starting the operation, whatever was in ready stock with them, he to move that from his factory to our factory was extremely difficult. The truck drivers had abandoned the vehicles on the road and they had gone home. Getting the drivers back, getting them to move vehicles, and getting material that was already produced and kept ready in the supplier factories was an extremely difficult task that we had to really engage ourselves into. Then came the situation basically where getting raw materials for the vendor was getting into a problem. More so in terms of imports. All the major port operations had come to a standstill. Ships stopped calling on major ports in India because there was nobody available to unload consignments that came in the ship. So without calling on a port destination, they went to the next. Now, when I'm talking about all this, basically, let me tell you, in each and every step, each and every operation, one could raise a question of corruption. Basically, when I have to open a factory, do I need to grease the palms of the officials in the government agencies? If I need to open the port, ensure that custom officials basically clear my bill of entry, is there money involved? Getting trucks to be on the road, getting supplies, are there issues? Do we need to pay exorbitantly high prices? These are all areas where one could suspect that there are been wrong deals. So as a company, what we did is we said we will provide the service and basically go ahead and do things. So for example, we represented our suppliers with government agencies because the tendency of a malpractice is more with a small enterprise than a multinational company like us. Second, basically, we are represented through our various forums of industry with these government officials, putting pressure on them and trying to see how we could get support. And let me tell you, we got excellent support from all these agents. In terms of picking up material from the supplier's place, we used our service providers to go to the supplier's end and pick up that material from them. As big companies, we are less impacted by this COVID to the extent that the service provider cannot charge high rates from us as he would do with a smaller enterprise. These are some things that I wanted to really talk about. Second, basically, your objective as in procurement is also to ensure that we get continuity of supplies. And here, as Professor said, reliability of a supplier is very, very important. More reliable your supply base, more is their sustainability and your sustainability operations. And this is what we really did. We helped suppliers in every possible way so that they don't get affected during this, or the impact is very little. For example, let me tell you, when Narendra Modi ji declared the lockdown, the countrywide lockdown, on that particular day, we had more than 2,500 contract laborers in our factory where there is a project going on. Narendra Modi ji very clearly said, please ensure that the laborers are paid their salaries so that they can sustain their living and they are not impacted. When you have a contractor serving you, cannot bill for services that they render. So they cannot get money from you for any work that they're doing. How can you expect them that they would continue paying wages to their work? Here is where our company managing director said, as a company, we have a responsibility. He himself wrote a letter to all my vendors, service providers saying, please ensure that you pay your workmen. And if you have a challenge, please approach us. Wherever possible, we will support you. So here is a company where even today, wherever we could support our contract work people, we are supporting. And let me tell you how we got also benefit out of this. When the lockdown got lifted, many of the contract men migrated to their hometowns and major projects got hit. I am really proud to say that we did not lose even one day of work in our project site, and our projects are nearing completion. Within the next 1 month, they would be complete. So if you support people, they also have the loyalty towards you. The suppliers know that they could stand when buyer stands with them. They also have a responsibility of standing with the company. And basically, it's a mutual relationship where I help them, they help us, and that's how we ensure sustainability of operations. And things are coming back to normal now, and probably we see that this association between the supply chain and the company would sustain many more challenges going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Iyer. That's a very important point over there, which is again highlighting what was even touched upon by our earlier panelists of a collaborative and a supportive relationship with suppliers. And again at M40 we refer to it as responsible purchase practices, which actually again is highlighting similar concepts, and it comes back to really working together to ensure that there is continuity, business continuity, which is supportive in a manner. It actually involves exactly what you highlighted, Mr. Iyer, an open dialogue. It first starts with that open dialogue between the two parties that are engaged in the transaction or business relationship, and then thinking of solutions, that allow both to work ahead and move ahead so that there is lesser impact. So thank you for actually sharing that live example with us. And here is good examples of how business continuity remains even in challenging times. It does come down to integral ethical concepts that are ingrained at the top level in company policies, and then further practiced by operational aspects of organizations that actually go further down to the transaction or trade relationship. One last question, if I may ask you, Mr. Iyer, and that's really coming to what is the value of continuous monitoring, third-party audits and codes of conduct during this time of crisis?
Well, Natasha, I think both the eminent speakers before me talked about a code of conduct. And coming from a private enterprise, I would like to talk maybe a little more and expand to what Professor talked about. in his when he expressed his views on the code of conduct. Now, with every purchase order that we release or a contract we release, there is a code of conduct that is also going to the vendor. Now, let me tell you, basically, yes, I agree with Mr. Mishra that integrity is a problem in procurement. And basically, so that's the reason in a small enterprise, you have the owner or the owner's family taking care of procurement for their needs. But when the company grows, you can't have the owner or his family taking care of the needs. You have to depend on people to do the procurement activity. And here, how do you control? How do you ensure integrity and less corruption or zero corruption in the procurement? That's where the code of ethics, reinforcement in terms of training really helps. And I would like to talk about basically multinational companies with whom I have worked and basically how basically they go about this work. So the code of conduct that we talk about has a lot of items in it mentioned. One is definitely if associates must disclose potential or existing conflict of interest. So a supplier is responsible for price, quality, delivery, service. In discharging his duty as a supplier, if there is a demand, he has to, from anybody within the organization, he is expected to share this with the company. There is strict antitrust compliance. When we talked about zero, I think Mr. Mishra talked about one less corruption or more corruption. Here we are talking about zero compliance, zero tolerance. When we say it's immaterial whether the corruption is 10 rupees or maybe 10 crores. What we are looking at is the corruption there. So there is zero tolerance towards corruption. We also heard about sustainability. Sustainability is a very important aspect, and we have not only things on paper, but we have also audits. Take care to see if whatever the vendor has actually mentioned as process is on the ground. Together for Sustainability, a movement in Europe, where basically we ensure that we do regular sustainability audits of vendors and we share the reports with other like-minded companies in the association so that every company buying from the vendor do not need to do a similar operation. Basically, again, somebody talked about human rights, etc. Yes, healthy work environment, ensuring there is no abuse of child labor, compliance to Indian laws, all checked during these. See, there's one more thing I wanted to talk about here. When Mr. Ashutosh Mishra said, probably within the private enterprise, there may not be control to look at things that are happening there. Let me tell you, sir, within the department, we have an intelligence team. We have an internal audit, which is conducted by the risk management team. We have an external audit, one of the big fours doing audit. With all these audits, basically things come to light. Yeah, I agree. It may not come to light immediately. There might be a lag. But when it comes to notice, there is so much of serious action taken that basically in case of many of these incidents, so here there is no job security. If you play mischief, you're out of the company. In terms of export-import violation, ensuring that you take care of trade bans, international embargoes are all there. Basically, ensuring transparency in whatever you are reporting is again a major requirement. So we have third-party agencies like Covadis support us in the audits. We have assessments, we have audits. We have EHS audits, which ensure that basically all HSE requirements within the supplier's company is taken care of. Even items like ventilation, that people are subject to, all this is taken care of in various audits. So just in a nutshell to say, we have a supplier code of conduct. Let me tell you, sir, I don't know how many of the government companies you refer to this. We have a clause which talks about conflict of minerals, where we say that many of the countries, they support terrorism. Let me take one example, a country like Congo. Congo supports terrorism. Cobalt is one mineral which is available in plenty in Congo. We have in our code of conduct even such clauses which says, if we come to know that you are buying material from this country or a supplier in that country, you will not exist to be in our supplier list. So if we go to that extent, sir, to ensure code of conduct among suppliers. So, ma'am, we not only have code of conducts in place in private enterprise, we also have third-party due diligence. We have internal audit, external audit within the department, etc., supporting us on all this. And like I said, how do you ensure compliance? Is reinforcement by training to the colleagues in the procurement team and ensuring that we get people of the right quality, right education, and basically the right attitude, and then get them to the company to work so that they follow what is expected of them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ayer. Some very, very important points, and I hope all of you in the audience listening into us also did catch them all. And one thing, Mr. Ayer, mentioned, which I cannot emphasize even more on, is the zero tolerance aspect when it comes to integrity. And I will highlight over here, even at Amphori and all our members, buyers, as well as the supply chain, we consider this to be zero tolerance. So zero tolerance means it immediately calls for action. There is, of course, consequences, or also immediate corrective action plans that are required, and really unethical behavior in all its form, which could include attempt of bribery or intentional misrepresentation in the supply chain. And I highlight on this because this also includes things like hiding of production sites, or lacking of business license, or purposefully under declaring the size of workforce, just among some, but also going deeper into lower tiers of the supply chain, because today the supply chain is more complex than we've ever known it before, and it's not just restricted to one tier, but it goes into multiple tiers. And if I take the example of a textile supply chain, for example, it could even go down to home workers. And this is where I come to the aspect of transparency, which is a very, very important contribution to integrity, and it actually facilitates integral practices when transparency is followed. Thank you so much, to our panelists for providing such a comprehensive and holistic overview in the journey and importance of integrity in business. And I will just conclude by, in a way, systematically outlining, some of the important aspects of how integrity can be embedded in practice. And as our panelists have highlighted, there is a commitment to the top, but it also includes, having a policy. And some of what I'm going to highlight is what we also, share with our members and producers in what we call the Amphori BSCI System Manual, which is the Business Social Compliance Initiative System Manual. So, to have a policy in place that publicly condemns corruption, extortion, and bribery as unacceptable, unethical behaviors. Also to have procedures in place, to prevent, detect, and remediate any act of corruption. to identify where major risks and corruption could occur. It is important to be aware of what risks are there in the environment and what could be the pitfalls. And then furthermore, investigate and discourage any misbehavior amongst workers, particularly those with decision-making power. Very importantly, reward ethical behavior and integrity in workforce and management. As organizations, many tend to reward, in other form for other KPIs and achievements, but integrity is also a very important aspect that does require recognition and reward. And then include ethics and integrity as part of the training offered to workers and managers. Not everyone may have had the opportunity to attend, business management courses. And it is also the responsibility of organizations to provide this training and awareness building, which does then fit with the ethos of an organization. And then monitor and reduce risks of corruption in relation with key stakeholders. Our panelists also touched upon stakeholders, which play an important role to any business organization. So again, monitor and reduce the risks in relation to key stakeholders. But then we also go forward to highlight that the auditee should keep accurate information regarding its own activity structure and performance. And really, this also comes down to the transparency that I was speaking about a bit earlier, where it's sharing information about activities according to applicable regulations and industry benchmark practices. There may be a lot that's not there, but there also is a lot that is already there in the environment when it comes to regulatory norms or industry benchmark practices, which could, already initiate and provide a good foundation framework to work with. Accurate information and structured information and transparent practices are good. So as I kind of provide this nutshell of an overview, what I would love to do now is to take questions from the audience, because I do know that there are a whole bunch of questions out there, and they are also relevant to what we discussed today. So at this stage, Seema, may I ask you maybe to highlight some of the questions, or I could pick on, I see that there are 9 questions that we have from the audience at this stage. Seema, are there any further, or should I go with these?
Those are the ones, the questions that are there.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. So thank you, dear audience, for being such an active participant to this, and we will try and take all your questions. We bear in mind we have 20 minutes at this stage, so panelists, we try and cover most of them, and do try and be brief. And maybe I will maybe a panelist can take each of the questions to begin with. So the first one is whom to call professional buyers. What qualities, skills are expected in professional buyers and leaders? I open this to the panel. Perhaps any one of you could take this, and maybe we could time this down to a couple of minutes so we allow for more questions too.
So can I take a lead?
Yes.
Okay. So to the audience who has asked this question, basically I couldn't get a chance to talk about Indian Institute of Materials Management. Indian Institute of Materials Management offers various programs in procurement, from a diploma going up to a master's, going up to a PhD. So whom do you call a professional buyer? A professional buyer is one who, in addition to his technical background, has additional qualifications in procurement or supply chain management, and basically who implements whatever he has learned in the management program onto his work in the company. So for example, basically, if you let me take a example. Today, in the place of negotiations, you have auctions that are being used. We teach auctions in our courses. So whether it's reverse auction or a ticker auction, and within the ticker auction, whether it's a dynamic ticker auction or a Hong Kong ticker option. These are all tools that have been taught to our students. Basically, you have some other tool called the total cost of management, which helps you in a prudent decision making. Basically, you have supply strategies. So the sourcing, strategic sourcing, category management, these are all taught in various of our programs. Not only IIMM, I'm sure, like Professor said, a lot of Indian Institute of Management also have some certification programs which basically teach on these concepts. A buyer in the industry who uses all these tools of trade for working in the company and gets benefit for the company would be termed as a professional buyer.
And to add to what Mr. Iyer said, he works sort of unattached. So he doesn't have any bias or preference or anything. So he works just, and that is what professional means. So you don't carry any prejudices, bias, or preconceived notions. You work as if you were working for the organization in a most professional manner.
Thank you. That was a good insight. And Mr. Mishra, if there's anything you'd like to add to this question?
I think both of them have rightly answered this question. And in terms of a professional, I'll say, coming from a background of anti-corruption, I'll say somebody with ethical is also some sort of, I'll say, so that's only one addition. Already Mr. Iyer and Professor Samir has already answered this question. So my addition will be ethical. Ethical guy is also a professional guy.
Got it. Thank you for that. And we just did an analysis of the questions, and we were able to group them together, so that actually makes the process easier. So for the remaining 8 questions, they have been grouped into 3, and I will take them each at a time, giving us a fair time to really emphasize on them. So really, as a follow-up to this question that we just addressed, and maybe to complement in some ways also, the next question grouped would be, is there really a need of training, or is there a lack of will and determination when we speak about integrity? The people involved in the management of a company are highly educated and already well aware about the laws. I open the question to all 3 of our panelists.
I would like to answer this. I mean, if it's fine
Sure.
with us. Yeah. See, my answer is also based on my experience. Yeah. One is the will. I think that's very important in business context. One is the setting the priority. I mean, if you think that the ethical way of doing business is important, and it's one of the part of a sustainable business, then there is a commitment from the top. So many times, yes, training is very important, but at the same time, I feel that the tone at the top level, I mean, something which is coming from the top is very important. As Mr. Iyer has pointed out also, the code of conduct. There are companies like, the Mr. Iyer has given an example. But in general, what we have seen that, there is a demarcation between what is being implemented. Same way what I have seen in public sector, based on my experience, that there is an integrity pact. Okay, it says that I'll not pay the bribe, I'll not demand it. So people do sign it. Now, there is a commitment here in the public sector. There may be a commitment in the private sector, but we need to move beyond that commitment. We have to show it that we are committed to it. So how we are going to show it? One is, of course, the training, and second, I'll say yes, third party audit is important, but can't we think of mechanism on the line of that we see in the integrity pact, where maybe the industry association, farmer group can do some sort of peer review? I'm not saying that make use reports public, put it in the media, but that can be used for improving the system within the organization. For example, ISO 37001, which talks about anti-bribery management system. I'm not sure how many of Indian companies have implemented it. We have seen that a lot of ISOs are there, but my experience is that companies do have a resistance. They don't want to make it very public. You enter into a consulting agreement with the consulting companies. You know, so you feel secure that this information will not go into public. But it's, we don't have to fear about it. I mean, as Professor has mentioned it, because it will add a value. Because many times when we talk about Tata's or Tata's code of conduct ethics, so there is some sort of a value addition to your product as well. I mean, this is purely based on my experience. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you for that insight there. And with this, I'll take the next question, which again has been clubbed, and this would be, how would you integrate integrity pact with contractual audit rights? Would you consider an additional burden, one more additional document, since audit rights would provide the same result?
Okay, can I take
For
this?
me, because, yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay, ma'am,
No, no, Professor.
let me tell you with the reference of my company. I am basically a global multinational company. We are basically dependent on funds from pension funds in Europe. Pension funds basically would not share their investments in your company if they come to know that buyer encourages child labor in any of our supplier associate companies. It's very important for us to ensure that not only we do the right things, but we also portray and project the right things to the world to ensure that everybody knows that the way we are working. So basically, it's similar in a public enterprise or a large private enterprise. We not only need to do things in a right manner, but also ensure that we have records to prove what we are doing. So basically, like us, our associates who are doing business with us, it's very essential that they not only do things in a right manner, but also report things in a transparent manner for the world to know.
Thank you, Mr. Ayer, and that's reiterating transparency, which is, also an important concept. Professor Srivastava, is there something you would like to add to this question?
Probably Ashutosh is more competent to add on this, and he was willing to speak. So I hand over to Ashutosh.
Yes, Mr. Mishra, all yours.
Yeah. Sorry, Natasha, can you repeat that question on integrity pact? Yeah.
Yes, definitely. It's really coming down to, how would you integrate integrity pact with contractual audit rights? And would you consider an additional burden?
Yeah. I mean, I dealt with the integrity pact for last 10 years. I don't think it's an additional burden, because many times what we have seen that how integrity pact implemented or executed in India is quite different how it was envisaged and implemented in other countries. One is, integrity pact is nothing but it's some sort of a moral commitment. It also gives an opportunity for a civil society. Now, here in India, no civil society organization is directly involved in the monitoring of integrity pact, but there are independent external monitors who are basically nominees from the Central Vigilance Commission, who are not a part of the organization, comes into the picture. They are not directly paid by the organization. They are not an employee of organization. So independent independent external monitor who are basically acting as a referee provides a platform for the grievance redressal. Okay, so there is some sort of the confidence in a vendor that I'm going to approach somebody who is not a part of an organization. So my grievances will be heard, and there will be a speedy resolution of my grievances. There is no as such cost involved. There are pulsating fees there, but more or less, I'd say that there is the mixed result. I mean, the result that has been reported from the PSUs. So it gives a platform for a speedy redressal of the grievances. So in a way, I don't think that it's going to, affect the already mechanism placed within the organization where you have audit, where you have a chief vigilance officer, where you have another laws in place.
Thank you. That's also some good insight that you add for us. And I move to the next question. How do you propose that companies use their audit clause with suppliers to audit their books?
Okay, I will take this question.
Sure.
In many of the contracts that we have with vendors, and basically these are tailor-made contracts, we have a clause to say, and again, mind you, we work out a consideration based on a model, which is cost plus. And here, basically, we also have a commitment on basically the quantity to be supplied by the vendor in a period of time, say 1 year. And in this, basically, we have a clause to say that we would inspect the books of the vendor to ensure that the information that he has shared with us is correct. Many a times, the vendor has a reservation in sharing information with us, mainly when they are our competitors or co-manufacturers for some of the products. So we have a clause to say that we will have appointment of third-party auditors, and third-party auditors will inspect their books for information and share that with us. So for example, let me tell you here, if you have a cost of a material that you're buying is based on some raw material cost, inspecting the bills of the raw material purchase at the supplier's end could be one. Second, if there is a commitment from the vendor that 80% of his products would be supplied to my company, to look at the production records, to look at the dispatch records, to confirm that 80% of his supplies have come to us. So this is how we use the audit clause in a contract. And of course, let me tell you, even though we have this clause, we may not do this every year, but we reserve the right to do it when we have a doubt.
And if I'm not wrong, just to add to Mr. Iyer, normally this information is kept confidential because the suppliers are many times apprehensive that it could be shared with their competitors in particular. So normally companies keep it confidential. It's only for their satisfaction verification that yeah, the supplier has the financial viability, the physical capacity, the capability so that their supplies are ensured.
Correct, that's right.
Thank you, both of you, for that detailed insight. And yes, some very valuable points over there also at the end of it, talking about trust and confidentiality, but the importance of, internal monitoring in that arena. I have time for one last question, which actually has come in as a follow-up to one of our questions. And I opened that with a couple of minutes. So it's really taking forward from the first question we had from the audience, which now asks, many organizations do not see buyers as professionals and do not place them in senior roles. How can this be strengthened? So in a nutshell, this is about strengthening, the role of the professionals in senior positions.
I can attempt that, but I'll attempt more from the sort of academic perspective, and maybe Mr. Iyer and from legal perspective, Ashutosh can add in. The role of the buyer historically was more of transactional and operational, and over a period of time, it has gone to be strategic. And in firms, normally strategic roles are carried by people at higher echelons at higher levels. Operation roles are by people at entry or lower levels, and tactical ones are at middle levels. So the lot of money companies spend, if you get into spend analytics, much of it goes into procurement. Most of the companies, barring say firms like say American Express, which are in a different business where there's not much of procurement spend per se. So once the firms have realized this across the world, normally it's going to the strategic level. So you have chief purchase officers, and now much of it is IT enabled. So your commercial function head or your not necessarily IT head, but somewhere now roles are coming up where it's carried out by supply chain professionals along with the IT support and so on. So it is getting a strategic level. Maybe some of our sort of attendees have not been able to see that in the Indian context because here still we don't have too many big players still, and there are a lot of small players who are sort of reluctant to change. And then, as Mr. Iyer pointed out, very smaller firms, it's on the trustworthy people rather than professional people. This function is actually handed over or managed by. I think they will add on to it, and if the audience is not satisfied, I'll try to answer more.
Yeah, thank you. I think I would like to add to what Professor
Yes.
said. See, today, I don't know if you have seen in the advertisements appearing in the newspaper, many of the large companies, when they have openings in procurement, there is a line to say that a GDMM or a PGDMM from IIMM preferred. So this goes to say that basically people want professionals for positions in procurement. There have been cases, ma'am, basically within the HR policies of large public sector and Indian companies, that if you have done a GDMM or a PGDMM from IIMM, you get two increments extra whenever you show a proof that you have passed the exam. So basically, I am saying not only in recruitment, even if you are already working for the company and you have shown that you have taken interest in learning more and getting professional, that's also encouraged by companies. Also to say worldwide, to say, now for example, I am a CPM, a Certified Purchasing Manager from ISM, Institute of Supply Management, USA. In USA, it is only CPMs who can sign a purchase order. I'm sure those realities will come to India also during the course of time. So like Professor said, this is the, maybe we are at the very initial phase. Once it gets more matured, we will see all this coming in India also. So it's better professionally qualified. If you are not, please get professional qualification very soon. So your value in the industry goes up.
Thank you. Those are, very deep insights. And I will just, also supplement by saying that practical wisdom and personal wisdom, is really also at the core of integrity. It's not rocket science. It's morals and ethics, which also lie at the heart of humanity. So in the practical wisdom is essential, and professional training can only enhance the same. But with this, I would like to say, thank you very much to all our panelists and all the very rich knowledge that you have shared with us and the audience today. And thank you very much, dear audience, for listening in this morning and now afternoon, and also your active interaction and questions. We will shortly, in about 29 minutes, pass the baton on to Europe, and the next session of this marathon series will continue from Europe, and look forward to maybe some of you joining us there too. Thank you once again, Afin and Seema, and collaborative action, which lies at the core of Alliance for Integrity's work, is important, critical, and a very, very effective measure and tool to battle corruption and issues. So collaboration and collaborative action lie ahead for us. Good afternoon, all of you, and thank you once again. Goodbye, and have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.